Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fabric Spotlight, a series of talks we have with enterprise CXOs, infrastructure executives, cloud infrastructure investors, and entrepreneurs. Of course, entrepreneurs. Today is my pleasure to welcome Ramin Sayar, President and CEO of Sumo Logic. Hello, Ramin. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Hello, and thank you for having me. Good to see you again.
So, before we kind of like launch into the whole thing, we of course know you today as CEO of Sumo, but before we talk about Sumo itself and the business and your role there, how about you set the stage by sharing a bit about your journey before joining the company and the experiences that have shaped your career for that?
Sure. I think, part of my journey, honestly, has been a combination of luck and good fortune, as well as timing, as well as hard work, like all of us. And, early on, I started my career at an internet company called Netscape. And so during that time that we all can relate to, the browser wars were big, and obviously the battle between Netscape and Microsoft and everyone knows about that. But I worked on the enterprise side in the marketing, and then the product marketing, and then product management group.
Okay.
And then from then on, I got a chance to work at a company called TIPCO, the information bus company, and in product roles, and then evolved from there to a company called Mercury, where we were one of the first application performance management, or APM businesses, which got ultimately consumed or acquired by Hewlett Packard. So I got a chance to work at HP and run all their data center products and business. And then that inevitably led me to VMware, where I got a chance to work on building out a new business, new product line to address the multi-cloud effort. And that's how I came to come across Sumo. Interestingly, I was looking at the space, and what they had started to do back in 2010 was effectively build an analytics platform in the cloud for security practitioners, which was their background, and more. And we can talk about that.
Yeah, quite an illustrious career, I must say. Very impressive. So why don't we kind of like double click a little bit on the Sumo business and how you are driving the cloud-based delivery of what you are saying, real-time analytics and continuous intelligence. So that would be very interesting to hear about.
Okay, so maybe taking a step back for a second, it's probably important to state and restate something that we all can relate to, and that is, every business operating today must transform not only to digital business, but to cloud business, or else, risk being disrupted. And so this transition that people talk about, in a lot of cases, it's a transformation because it has implications to people, process, and technology. And underpinning all that makes it more complex, relevant to what we do, is the tsunami of data, the unprecedented volume of data that's growing from every touch point across every technology, application component, infrastructure is rapidly increasing, right? And one of the many challenges as a result is the organizational models first, secondly, the tools, and third, the lack of visibility, let alone intelligence, is hindering that progress for that transformation, and something we refer to as the gap in the intelligence economy. And so that's what we've been solving for. This is a category that we created around continuous intelligence, and that we're pioneering.
Okay, that's interesting. So there is a particular flavor of this continuous intelligence that seems to be applied towards the operational aspects of application delivery. And Gartner has termed this AIOps as a big focus of IT. And companies in your space, this real-time analytics space, continuous intelligence space, are investing, seem to be focused on that area. What are your thoughts and strategies in that space?
Well, coupled with what I was just saying right now in terms of the implications that cloud, digital, and this data tsunami is having, effectively, what used to be there in central IT groups providing a lot of this as a service, like IT operations management as a service or security as a service, is starting to shift left and right. Meaning it's moving into the lines of business. Practitioners need to own, be responsible for quality and code, let alone reliability and performance, right? Hence DevOps and the tools and all that.
Yeah.
And similarly, security practitioners need to be able to manage not just endpoints and firewalls and the like, but everything that's happening in infrastructure to apps. And so there's this big shift that's happening, right? Now to your question in terms of, what are we doing about this? Well, very early on, our founders started with a background in security, right? From the SIM space. And the mission was to build effectively a SIM in the cloud for the cloud. But in 2012, not too many security practitioners were adopting SaaS or cloud. And when the service was put out there, guess who started using it? Developers, DevOps teams, tech ops, site reliability, and more. Because they needed an analytics-based approach for the logs, their metrics, and other data to quickly identify and isolate and troubleshoot, not just monitor issues. And so what's happening is a reinstantiation of the traditional ITOM or APM space into what analysts are calling AIOps, but really is a continuation of what's been happening, partially because of the data growth, partially because of the application architectures moving from 3-tier to N-tier, and partially because of the fact that there's not just a growth in data, but a volume of false positives that are making the job really difficult for practitioners to monitor and troubleshoot. And so therefore, analytics-based approaches, statistical correlation, machine learning, AI, all get kind of bundled together into AIOps to really help someone get an informed decision and become intelligent. That's what Sumo does.
Let's take just a little bit of a zoom out there. Sumo has kind of like focused on cloud-based delivery, like you mentioned from the very start. And you yourself have had a very long experience with cloud infrastructure and cloud native solutions. So if you look at Sumo Logic's approach to the cloud, how would you say, what are the key areas that are helping the enterprises with the cloud adoption?
So from a purely non-technology perspective for a second, what we're trying to help our customers do, like I mentioned earlier, is break the silos and the gaps in intelligence and knowledge across development, operations, security, and more, right?
Okay.
Second thing is, if you look at it from a macro perspective, we're trying to help with using analytics as the core foundation of our platform to address quality, right, as one aspect, to address release velocity, because that's what's happening now. Third, reliability. Fourth, security and compliance, right? And fifth, business value, right? And business intelligence. And so those dimensions are the way that we actually package up capabilities into solutions with Sumo and third parties so that customers can take advantage of our technology platform in bite size and then expand and grow as they need to. So what are we doing to help there? Well, we first deliver cloud native architecture, to your point. And that means true multi-tenant system from the get-go when we started in 2010, where we've written our own PKI infrastructure, data encryption, transit rest, the things we do around key management, things we do on isolation of data throughout the pipeline, and how we normalize that versus having you to pre-parse it like other tools, right? To simplify how you get data in, to ultimately provide out-of-the-box value to get insights and intelligence without you having to write a query, a search, do other things to get that information, whether that's security or operations or development or anyone.
So it's to help enterprises extract value from their data.
Help extract value to improve quality, release velocity, reliability of their digital applications and services, to improve security and compliance, and ultimately business value and impact.
So Ramin, you addressed a little bit about the security of the data a little bit earlier in the isolation and all of that. But I still want to ask, do enterprises still, are they nervous about entrusting their data to the cloud and be processed there? Do you hear any concerns, objections? How are you addressing that?
Well, sure. I think naturally part of any enterprise organization maturation as they look at digital and cloud is centered around security and access control and policies, particularly for those that are in regulated industries, right? And that's where a mass majority of the market is still now transitioning and shifting to the cloud, not the early tech companies only, right?
Right.
And so what we've seen as a result, I would say several years ago, we would land in the lines of business or DevOps teams around a observability or logging or monitoring, and then go to security to get approval, which would ultimately potentially provide an upsell opportunity, right? You fast forward now, and in a lot of cases in the enterprise, we actually are starting with security. And they're introducing us into the lines of business centralized dev teams, right, to partner with them. Doesn't mean that we get the deal in security right away, but they're helping partner with the other teams to make the decision on security and observability tools, right? I'll give you a great example. A large insurance company, they were migrating 32 workloads to the cloud. They brought in a consultant, and that consultant decided with them that we first need to pick our technology provider, then our cloud provider. And during that process, they selected Sumo. Sumo helped them decide which cloud vendor, which cloud hyperscale provider they would go with. And security was part of that RFP. Security was part of the bake-off and technology evaluation, right? And then a year later, they became a Sumo customer on the security side after they transacted with us on the ops and DevOps side. And so that trend is actually interestingly starting to pick up, where they're actually not just partnering, but leading the way for the other parts of the organizations that are going through migration.
On the other side of you talked a little bit about the benefits of the data analysis. One area where the data analytics seems to be of very much interest is in IoT. Fabric, we have also been exploring IoT infrastructure. From your vantage point at Sumo, what would you feel are some of the disruptive innovation areas that relate to IoT?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few different aspects, and I think particularly what's relevant to Sumo with respect to IoT is around consumer, right? Back to the notion of digital applications and how those get utilized and experienced is through mobile devices and the like, right? And so performance, like I said, quality, performance and reliability and security that enhances that experience on that digital device, right? So we have customers that not only are building the apps for the regular form factor, right, and services for the web, but also for mobile devices. We have mobile device manufacturers that use us for reliability of their service, let alone security. We have content providers and CDN providers that have to be able to look for intermittent service issues, right? So those are how they use it today. But more generally, I think what you're referring to is the trend that's happening, and that is from the data center to the edge, right? And so in that case, what's really interesting is it's requiring some aspects of collection and analysis at the edge, right? And processing, and then some that's in the cloud. And so the only way to really do that is through cloud native architecture, right? Where you can push some aspects of collection analysis and pre-processing, and then compress it, encrypt it, send it to the cloud where you can do more analysis in the back end in real time and concurrent. That's the architecture Sumo's built. And that's where we have customers using us today that are in certain verticals and gaming and others that rely on stuff that's at the edge and device, right? As well as in the cloud. Another use case is industrial, right? And this is something that we haven't necessarily directly gone after yet, but as an opportunity for us going forward. As more of the consumerization of IoT happens for all of us at home, you see more of that happening on the industrial side with robotics and automation and the like, which generates a lot more data again. So interestingly, we have customers that use Sumo Logic for things around home automation, things around traffic light,
Mm.
and management systems in the cities,
Interesting. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? It's just another data point. It's a set of telemetry.
Yeah.
All those signals that need to come together and look for patterns in that to understand traffic and reroute, to understand when a drone is taken off in a home to prevent a break-in or notify something, to understand how to actually redeploy a service and relocate because you have usage patterns that are varying, right? All those fundamentally still require cloud native architecture, back to the first point we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Sumo started.
Particularly with the real time and continuous intelligence that you talk about, it seems like that is quite applicable perhaps in the area of industrial IoT. So that may be an expansion as you go along, it seems like. You touched upon a little bit about what can be done at the edge. So the data center on the edge, and the edge seems to be becoming a little bit more prominent now with 5G coming up.
Yeah.
Telcos are starting to get interested again, saying that, hey, we lost the data center wars, but we are naturally at the edge, so we are going to get back into that game. So for Sumo itself or for your customers, are there specific things that can be done at the edge that would, you mentioned data collection and analysis. Are there other things that can be done at the telco edge that can add value to your business?
Well, I mean, I think yes, and I think part of that is not only from a technology perspective, part of that is also from a regulatory perspective, right? And where the data resides.
GDPR.
And so GDPR and the like, exactly. So you have data sovereignty issues, and so therefore the data can't necessarily leave the raw data, right?
Yeah.
But analysis and aggregation of all that can, right? Or a subset of that data can, that's not PAI or sensitive data or whatever else. And this is again where an advantage of an architecture like Sumo that's cloud native that can push more processing logic and intelligence closer to collection, not just be a dumb forwarder, right? Like other tools do, can help in these things, right? To deal with reliability again and performance, to deal with quality of experience through the CDNs and the mobile device factors, and lastly, to deal with obviously the security and compliance and access controls.
Right. So you're talking about how your architecture naturally enables a better utilization of the edge architecture. That's very interesting. So slightly different question. So Sumo went IPO kind of like during the middle of the pandemic, right? Did the new normal in terms of distributed workforce and work from home, did that anyway contribute to your growth and position well for making the transition from the private to a public company? Any comment, thoughts on that?
Well, truth be told, I don't know if any one of us were prepared for how much of an abrupt change COVID would have to our workforce, right? And while a lot of people really focus on productivity or hiring or retention, those are really important. But I think the other aspect that's equally, if not more important, is the mental health, right? And so, everyone, including me, thought, oh yeah, in a few weeks we'll be back in the office, right? A few weeks turned to couple months turned to more months, and here we are a year later, right?
You're coming up on a year,
And so, to your initial part of the question, I think going public during a pandemic and COVID was wild. I mean, it was,
I bet.
in some ways it was exciting because it was such an important thing that we as a company have worked on for so long. In other ways, it was kind of anticlimactic because I didn't feel like I could have all of our employees and customers and partners, or as many as we could, participate as much as possible, right? And the whole roadshow was virtual, so it's hard to kind of build a connection. And so you can learn something from that. And I think that's the point of your question. This has fundamentally changed how we invest. And you know this now, right? A lot of pitches are done via Zoom, right? How we recruit and hire, how we actually develop and release and manage services, how we actually sell and prospect to customers, right? And so this has fundamentally changed our binary notion of that we needed to be centralized in one or multiple locations to get the mass, I guess to say, the best productivity out of a workforce. right?
Yeah.
And so I think this has been a learning curve for Sumo, and it's been a learning curve for me as a leader, as a executive running a company that's gone through this. It's how do you need to think differently to really not just instill confidence in the team, calm them, right? Make sure they're seeing value of what they're doing, but also be mindful of the EQ aspect in terms of their mental health. And so you're only as good as your people. Products don't always win. It's the people.
Yeah. That's an excellent thought process, Ramin. Very good. So kind of like we are coming towards the end of the discussion here, we always finish with some bit of advice from people whom we are talking to the audience, which tends to be entrepreneurs. So you certainly have had a long career of on being on both sides. So you would have had some excellent learnings. So what would you like to communicate to our entrepreneurial audience? Advice, how they should deal with things, partner with people like Sumo?
So I'm going to borrow something that I was told many years ago. And a lot of times the advice that people seek is what made you successful.
Yeah.
And the advice that people need is the opposite. Meaning, what mistakes did you make and how did you navigate through those?
Yeah.
And I think those who are wired the latter way, which I think because of my parents and the like, being Middle Eastern, I think that's kind of how I was naturally wired. And so I could really gravitate and connect to that. And so one of the things is be conscientious of not necessarily following the path of success all the time with people. Because you're not understanding the mistakes they made, or you're not reflecting on the mistakes you've made to learn, adapt, and grow. That's one area. I think another area is really around humility, because relationships are what drive businesses and teams, highly productive teams that deliver trust and ultimately the best value for shareholders.
Yep.
And it starts from the top. You're either rotten from the top or you're not. And so it starts with everything you do by your actions every day, not what you say. And so humility and humbleness in terms of how you lead, how you course correct, how you give feedback is really important. There's a lot of smart people out there that are very arrogant. There's a lot of smart people out there that want to be, bolstering all the things they've done, but they won't share their experiences as to what mistakes they've made and how you could do differently. So it kind of ties back to the first point. The third point I say is to an entrepreneur, as they go through the journey, and there's different phases of a journey of a company, it's never a straight line. It's never up a mountain straight like this.
Right.
You always have to traverse.
Zigzag.
And you have to have the stomach for that. You have to have the patience for that. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice quality, right? But you have to be able to be balanced like that. And so it goes to how I say compartmentalize things, right?
Okay.
And there's times that things are going to be rough. There's times that things are not be rough. And how you communicate and how you make decisions is really important. Yeah. So one thing that I followed very closely, and I constantly try to make sure a lot of my leaders are aware of, is there's 4 vectors of communication: up, down, out, and across.
Okay.
Know your role, right? Know who your audience is and how you're communicating. Second thing related to that is be absolutely clear on decision making. You're either informing, you're either involving, or you're empowering someone to make a decision. And you'll listen differently if you use those 3. So those are a couple of the tricks that I think about for every leader, every entrepreneur, to kind of have as table stakes as they traverse that mountain and that journey from small company, startup, to hopefully an IPO success and more.
Excellent set of points. Great advice to the audience out there. So Ramin, thank you very much for stopping by and sharing your thoughts. It was an excellent conversation. Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate having the opportunity to be here again. Best wishes.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for another insightful Spotlight episode later. Bye.